Right, let's get going. All right. Welcome everybody to the third Gardeners and Growers workshop. We hope you enjoyed the previous two. What we're finding is that we are learning more by preparing these workshops than before. So thanks for your participation and feedback. We really enjoy it. It gives us encouragement to continue. Just to confirm, you may join the private agricultural teachings. We do a lot there with Mr. Keshe on a weekly basis. Also join the private teachings, and then, as I've said before, you gain access to all the teachings in 2015, and that's where we are finding a lot of information. And it's only €100 for the year. So when you look at the amount of information compared to the amount you pay, you just can't compare. And then obviously the books as well. There's huge amounts of information in there. All right, so we'll start off with our third workshop for the year, and we'll see what the end of the year brings. And I think there's going to be lots of changes, good for the better, I think. Today's workshop, we're going to look at seeds. We've done some experiments. We'll show what experiments we've done on the effects of the different GANs fields that have had on the seeds. We'll also have a look at the understanding of how seeds work from plasma point of view, a little story on the original seed, and then other experiments that we've done on some of our seeds with using the GANSes. So our first experiment that we did last year, this was done during March and May of last year. What we wanted to do was to evaluate the effects of all these different GANSes that we had learned to make, and what sort of effects that the fields from these GANSes would have on different seeds. And the whole idea behind this experiment was to see whether if we store seeds, could we enhance their properties with the GANS fields? So could we set up a huge storeroom, put in some GANs, and those fields would preserve and enhance benefits for those seeds. So that was the whole idea behind this experiment. What I looked at doing was I took 6 different seeds. So we had beetroot, rocket, lettuce, green ones, lettuce, red ones, tatsois, and kale. So I tried to get a nice variety into the mix. I then also used different GANSes. So we had CO2, we had our copper oxide, zinc oxide, CH3. I then created a mix of GANSes, which was a mix of CO2, CH3, and zinc. We also had made some seawater GANs, and then Ormus, which I've labeled as Ormus because that's a product that we had been using, which is very similar to the sea GANs, but just made differently. So I wanted to see whether that would have an effect. So what we did is I broke the experiment up into 3 parts. I exposed the seeds just for 1 day, and exposed seeds for 5 days and 10 days. Now I'll show you how I did this experiment. I had a little glass jar, and I placed a small amount of the actual GANs into the glass jar, and then I filled it with water. I then filled the plastic test tubes with all the different seeds, and I immersed these test tubes into that water. I placed those into the jar. So the whole idea was the seeds were to remain dry, but through the water, I was thinking whether they would be affected by the fields of the GANs. So there's the all our bottles that we had in a row with all our test tubes of all the seeds sitting in the bottles. So the sets that we had left soaking for one day, I then took some of those seeds and planted, and then I put them back to soak for another couple of days. So I did this so that the final seeds that I planted had been sitting in those jars for 10 days. I seeded a row of our treated seeds that we had been soaking, and then next to that I did a row of untreated seeds. So I just wanted these as a bit of a standard to see how they would compare. So the ones with a tag lying down are the ones that we had treated. These are our trays on our seeding table. So the picture on the left, that was the 24th of March, and the picture on the right was sort of a week later on the 31st of March. Here's further pictures, that was on the 7th, another week later, 7th of April. So you can see that they've all been growing very nicely during that time. What I've done now is I took a couple of close-up photographs. So we can see a photograph on the left, those were all the seeds that had been exposed to the fields of the sea gans for one day. Now you can see the upright tags. That row is the ones that were treated, and the one next to it was the untreated. So you can see the two rows of red letters there. One was exposed to the fields and the other one wasn't. And those just show the different varieties. There's the kale on the right and another green lettuce on the left. The picture on the right is the 5 days soaking with copper gans, and you can see there we've got tatsois on the left, lettuce in the middle, and our reds on the right, also with the rows that were treated and untreated. There's the picture on the left was with the CO2 gans on 5 days. Well, both of them are CO2 on 5 days, and it's just showing you our different varieties of seeds there with the treated and untreated. Here's another photograph of the zinc oxide for 5 days with our whole range of seeds that we had planted. Right, then what we had done is we had placed them into our aquaponics system on the 19th, and trying to keep the conditions correct is we planted all of our seedlings into the system on the same day. So even the ones that had only been soaked for 1 day were planted with the 5 day and 10 day. So I try to keep the parameters the same. So there they were planted into our system. Here was the 19th. You can see how they had grown. They're all lovely and lush. So they were all seeded for 1 day, 5 day, 10 days, all planted together, and we harvested them all on the same day. So this was about 63 days from when we seeded. So when we come to some observations, particularly at the seedling stage, this photograph is 24 days from when we seeded. As I've said before, the row with the tag is the ones that we had exposed to these fields, and the control was the untagged. And what we had discovered, and I'm sure you've seen by now, is that there's really no difference. To us, the color was the same, the height of the little seedlings was the same, growth rate, overall health. we couldn't really tell any difference at this stage at all. Even at the harvest stage, when we cut the lettuce, there was also no difference in the color, the height, the health of the lettuce, or even in the weight. It was like cutting exactly the same lettuces that we had planted, whether they were exposed to the fields of the ganses or not. So we came to a conclusion is that the seeds exposed to the fields of the gans show no effect or changes. There was just nothing that we had observed at all, which got us thinking as to now, why is this the case? And we all know from our biology days that the seeds have a coating. So these seeds are effectively designed to protect themselves from all the fields in the environment until water is added to break through this protective layer. This is why certain seeds can sit dormant for years until the right conditions are created to allow germination. So our conclusion was that to get any effect is the seeds needed to be soaked with GANS water to allow the fields to penetrate through this protective layer of the seed. And that possibly the GANS water would be the key to unlocking this potential. So our conclusions was, even though it was sort of a failed experiment in that we never saw any direct results, what it has confirmed is that nature and seeds has sort of designed the seeds to protect themselves until those right conditions are they're exposed to the right conditions, and then they will germinate. So it was an interesting experiment for us in the beginning, because at that stage we had very little understanding of all the different ganses and what they were supposed to be used for. So if there's any questions on this one before we go any further, just unmute yourself if you have.
Well, Neil here of Neil and Trish. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, just in reference to another experiment you had, you said about the fields, all of those things being so close, was a possibility that the fields interfered with each other, made it, a similar reaction?
Well, you see, what I'd done was, yes, I agree that all our little bottles with the different ganses were all together, but they were totally separate from my control seeds, which I had kept separately in our seed box. And what we have had confirmation when we presented this on agricultural to Mr. Keshe is these are the similar results that they found. So we were just confirming his testings that's been done before, is that the seeds exposed to the fields of ganses are not affected at all.
Okay.
So all we had done was confirm what was already sort of been established in previous experiments.
Good one. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Anybody else? Otherwise, we'll continue. All right. Right, I'll go on to now seeds and effectively a new understanding of how this all works with the plasma technology. First of all, just some very basics on how we need to look at seeds in the future is seeds are essentially the children of the mother plant. And they come in all shapes, sizes, and colors, as we know with all the various seeds. And the plants use nature. They use the wind, the animals, the birds, the insects to spread their children around to ensure survival of its species. The whole aim of the plants is to ensure their survival. So they go to extreme lengths to ensure that these seeds are spread around. The seeds, as we know, come from flowers inside of fruits like an avocado, or outside of the fruit like the strawberry. And nature has used ingenious ways to help this plant survive. What is, however, interesting and will open up a lot of questions in the future is the mother flower or plant, where essentially a lot of these seeds have come from, and these seeds are blown into the fields and new plants are established. That mother plant will maintain a direct line of communication to all its other baby plants that have germinated. So, you know, when one understands this statement, one has to look at how plants do communicate with each other, because there's already connections established. So if one looks at a huge forest and plantations where a lot of these older growth seeds have reseeded and reseeded and reseeded, we can understand how the plants effectively communicate with each other, because they all have that connection. The flowers, when the plants have flowers, they're also sending a signal to the animals in the insect world that they can come and eat them, which ensures the transfer of those seeds and the preservation of life of that plant again. So these two statements here can open up huge amounts of research, you know, years down the line, now that we begin to understand how the plants really work in nature and how they use, everything uses each other in balance. And the other point, which we'll see later on how it comes into it, is that the seeds are essentially a dried gans. We've got to look at them as a little tablet, or if you want to call it, of dried gans. On a very basic structure, I understand that there's huge amounts of detail that goes into the sort of the seed structure, and there's many types of seeds, but I'm not going to go into that today. All I want to look at is just the very basics. And what we have is the seed coat, which is the outside layer. Inside we have the cotyledon and what they call the radicle. And if you look at a lot of seeds, there's always that little bump on one end of a seed that either sort of sticks out or it's a little point. That is what they call the radicle. So when we look at understanding seeds, this outer layer of the seed, the skin, has a magnetical and gravitational field. So another way to say this is that the outer layer of the seed has a specific maggrav field strength, because inside is dried gans, and that creates our field, or the sort of atmosphere, if you want to call it, like the earth, and that creates the coating of the seed, which has a specific field. This field strength protects the seed from the environmental fields all around us. Otherwise, what would happen is seeds would be popping and germinating every time we had changes in weather, seasons changing. These seeds would be germinating. So this maggrav layer protects the seed until the right conditions are achieved. So only when we add water to a seed will we have germination of that seed. So we need to look at what water is first. Water is a plasma, and as science tells us, it's H2O. But we've got to look at it from a field strength point of view, is that we have your hydrogen, your two hydrogens and oxygen, but it has a total maggrav field strength of 18. And what happens is the field strength of water, being 18, is matching the field strength of the skin of the seed. So it's matching the seed's maggrav field. We then have that connection and interaction. But as the field strength of the water is slightly higher than the maggrav field strength of the skin, what happens is it pulls the skin open, allowing germination to begin. And then you have the beginning of germination and growth. Now, when we look at the plasma of H2O, oxygen being the higher strength, so the oxygen in the plasma of the water is gravitational, and that is what is pulling open the outer layer of the skin and allowing its exposure to the environment. Now, as we said before, the inside of the seed is dried GANS. This is now exposed to the water because the outer layers have been opened up. And what happens is the seed goes from the matter state to the GANS state and opens up. And you get that circular opening up of the fields, as Mr. Keshe always draws. So water is the plasma. It's the oxygen which is the gravitational and carries the field information. And this is the oxygen within the water that opens up the field, opens up the outer shell of the seed. And once this is opened, obviously is exposed to more water, the hydrogens from that water is then also providing the energy that the seed needs to go through and start its growth phase. So the water plays a sort of a dual role there in opening up the outer coating and then also providing the energy. And what happens is we have an interaction of three fields again, because initially you've got the seed, so you have the magnetic field of the mother seed, which is at radical. Mr. Keshe calls it the mother, so that's the tip on the seed. That'll have a certain field strength. You also have the inside of the seed, which will also have its own magnetic field strength. Now these two will sit, we have store seeds, they'll sit there and nothing will happen, nothing will germinate. So it's only when we're adding the third field of the magnetic field of the water, does it allow for those three to interact. And that water provides the potential difference between those two magnetic fields, and we start with the whole germination process. So again, it comes back down to the interaction of three fields. And this can be explained as well with our simple eggs, because we also have an outer shell, the egg shell. Inside we have the egg yolk, and we have the white of the egg, which is plasma water, and these two also have different magnetic strengths, and it's only when you get the sperm from the rooster coming in and interacting with the fields of the egg yolk and the blastoderm, as that's called, do we have the three interacting again, which leads to the creation of life, which is our little chicken. So once again, an unfertile egg will have two fields and you won't have the creation of life. The minute you add that third field, you have the creation of life. So as we've explained in understanding of the seeds, it is the water that is the key for the seeds. So if the water is the key, why don't we start soaking our seeds in the liquid plasma water of our different ganses and see what effects those will have? Any questions on that one? Did you understand? Anybody wants to?
Yes, Jimmy, can you hear me? Ross Martin.
Yes. Yes, Martin, how are you?
Ross.
Sorry, Ross.
The actual field strength, you say, in a seed is activated with water. Do you think it's ever possible to measure that field strength in some way?
Of the seed?
Yeah.
Well, most seeds have to be very similar to the water in matching the water, because if the field strength of water is 18, then for the seeds to be activated, they have to be of a similar field strength to find that match and to be be opened up by the oxygen, the gravitational field.
But yes, I'm not sure whether at the moment we'll find a way, but each seed must have different maggrav fields, because it's not only the water, but the water combined with temperature and a couple of other things that go on that maybe create energy in the water. So, you know, it's a combination with the water, but the water has to be there.
I was thinking of seeds in the bushland in Australia where a bushfire starts the process, but I guess water is part of that process as well, but they have to have a smoke or the being burnt in a bushfire to start the germination process.
Yes, I agree with you, and you're sort of touching on something that I'll bring in the next workshop, is that one of the examples would be the seeds that only germinate from a bushfire, and why this might be the case. But you'll also find some seeds will only germinate in certain seasons or after frosts or this and that. So that is something that I'll add to in the next workshop, because there's a lot more to it. I just wanted to just bring in the basics for today.
Thank you very much.
Good question.
It's a fascinating subject. Fascinating subject.
It is. All right. If there's nobody else, we'll continue. Yeah. There's a question there by Carl. He said yes. Okay.
No question, just a yes.
All right. Okay, so I'll hand you over to Lisa, and she'll give you some detail on what we found by soaking our seeds with plasma water.
Okay, so we did this experiment a while back, and we haven't actually put this out on the public teachings yet, so this is also new. So we're going to start with our basic soak. What we did was we soaked daikon radish in the liquid plasma water of CO2 for 12 to 24 hours. I'm not quite sure exactly, because we didn't take exact hours, but what we normally do with our radish, because we use these for microgreens, we do soak them overnight, sometimes from the afternoon before, and then we plant them either the following morning or the afternoon. So we soak these seeds in the liquid plasma, no GANs included, just the liquid plasma. So what we normally do is we allow these to grow for a week, and when you have a look, you can see that the plasma ones and the water ones look pretty similar. What we normally do is just water them a couple of times after they germinate. So they did get plasma water and normal water as well. So this looks very similar, but there's a marked difference, as you can see in the next slide, with the root growth. The root growth of the radish seeds soaked in CO2 were much bigger and much more dense. You can see on the pictures, and the normal radish root growth was pretty pathetic in comparison. So it seems to us that what happens is, when the plant starts establishing itself, obviously the first thing it takes care of is making sure it's got a good root system to facilitate the rest of its growth. So now, why CO2 actually works, when we look the C and the O is the connection between the seed amino acid structure and the CO2 GANs. When we look at the two of them together, they are the carbon is a connection and the oxygen is a gravitator. So it allows for a connection with the amino acid structure, but it also adds up to the total of the two. When you look at COH and N, it comes up to 43. And when you look at CO2,
44.
It's 44. So it's a very similar field strength, and so it feeds into the amino acid structure. So by soaking the seeds in the liquid plasma water and planting them in the ground, we're changing the entire environment around the plant, which has effects beyond this stage. So I wanted to explain as well that we're not just using this as a fertilizer, because the CO2 is not just a fertilizer. It literally changes the whole MAGRAV field of the plant, and in doing so, the plant becomes its own little strong spaceship that can withstand the fields of other things around it. So the healthier and stronger the MAGRAV field of the plant is, just like us, the more we can withstand any incursions from anything coming in. And we can be strong in ourselves, and the plant can therefore be really strong. So plasma adds to the plant's MAGRAV strength, and stronger MAGRAV in the plant leads to a change in the local environment. Plants are more independent of outside MAGRAVs, therefore less damage from excessive heat in summer. These are the things we've discovered. Strong, healthy plants, when usually we would have problems with mold or fungus in a very humid or low light conditions. Those radishes that we normally do, if we have overcast weather and rainy for the days that they are waiting to be cut, they often get mold and fungus. And we've had a lot that we've had to kind of throw away. But since we've been using the plasma, we haven't had that problem at all. The plants need less water. We've discovered that. They seem to not look very unhappy when it's hot during the day and you need to come and water them. They still look good. They're not looking like they want to hang down or get a little bit soft. They have really good color, and the plants last much longer after harvesting. Extended shelf life. That is one of the presentations we will be giving. I'm sure some of you have seen it in public, and we've done a couple of other bits on that since then. So you're creating a condition in and around the plant which says, I'm healthy, I'm not food. Mr. Keshe has explained before, for example, that if you have 4 people and stand them all in a row in a mosquito-infested area, you'll find a few that will be bitten badly, you'll find one that doesn't get bitten at all, and you'll find one that gets bitten horribly and terribly. And the reason is they're giving off a different MAGRAV strength, either inviting in the mosquitoes because you're saying, I'm food, come and eat me, or you've got a strong, healthy MAGRAV field around yourself which says, I'm not here, I'm healthy, and I'm not food. And this is what I think that the plants start doing when we feed them with the ganses, is they become so strong and independent within themselves that most bugs will not touch them. And so bugs that are drawn to unhealthy plants due to their condition would not usually attack the plants given the GANs. What we've found subsequently with all our systems is, instead of having, let's say, a moth pop in there and lay eggs and get caterpillars and an infestation where we lose all our lettuces, which has happened before, now when we're harvesting, we'll maybe find one fat caterpillar and think, okay, well, he's chomped a few leaves, but that's the end of it. So the infestations don't happen anymore. And this is quite crucial to understand that it's an unhealthy plant that pulls in a lot of the bugs. And so, yes, this is the end of that little part of our presentation. And if anybody's got any queries or discussions on that one.
All right, I will continue. When we have a look at our original seed, thousands of years ago, we had a grass seed. And over time, this plant is exposed to different climate conditions, heat, cold, droughts, rains. And the plants learn to adapt to all these different conditions. But essentially, these conditions are all different magnetical and gravitational fields, which the plants are exposed to, and they get to overcome those conditions. And what it's doing is it's adding layers of information to the seed's genetic makeup. And these are added year after year to the original seed so that it can cope with future conditions. And these layers of information which are added to the original seed will all be about germination, the size, producing different colors. So all these effects on the plants are all maggraph fields, all fields of information which are added to the seed year after year. So this is nature, and then we come along and we add more changes because we saw this grass produced some seeds, so we cultivated them over time, taking only those plants that produced more and larger seeds and taking those and cultivating them further. And this is what we call wheat today. It's essentially a grass seed that has been cultivated and changed, and it's into what we know as the wheat today. And all these changes have been done over time by us and the environment. And it's just the layers and layers of different maggraph fields which have been added to that original seed. We're still doing it today by naturally crossbreeding plants of the same species. A lot of growers will do that to try and get a bigger fruit, higher yielding plants. So it's all a crossbreeding, which does happen naturally in the environment as well. The scientists have also stepped in and they started creating genetically modified seeds where they're forcing essentially cross-species engineering, mixing plant and insect and bacteria genes and DNA into the plant so that they can create plants that resist certain insects and pesticides. And it's just not a natural process, and I think that's why we're seeing such a huge backlash around the world against genetically modified seeds, because we just have no idea of the long-term effects of those. All right, so when we have a look at the seed, what I've tried to illustrate here is the green little oval circle in the middle was the original seed, and all those layers of information all maggrav layers which have been added over time. So those layers of information would be about the color, the size of the plant. It helps it to grow in certain hot conditions, cold conditions. And when all these layers are added up over time, and you can get to essentially what we call the wheat today, which is the final maggrav layer that's been added on, which is the red one. Now, what will happen when we soak these seeds in CO2? When you have a look at the CO2, it has a maggrav field strength of 44. So you add up your carbon and your two oxygens and it gives you 44. Now, we've shown you earlier on that the water had a maggrav field of 18. So now, if you're adding your CO2, your liquid plasma water, you're now exposing the seed to a maggrav field of 44 instead of 18. So what this is going to do is start peeling away from the seed its different layers of magrav strength which have been added over time. So essentially, by soaking the seeds in the CO2, we've removed certain layers of information from the original seed until we reach a point where the last layer of information has a matching field with the CO2, and then at this point no further layers will be removed because a balance has been achieved. So the CO2 will allow us to remove certain layers of information that have been printed onto that seed until a point. We can look at soaking the seeds with CO2 and copper, or with zinc and CH3, and because we're adding higher strengths to that water, we will be able to remove additional layers of information until a new balance is created, and then no further magrav layers will be removed from that seed. So in summary, with the liquid plasma of the CO2 and other gases, we have the ability to restore seeds to their original. In other words, take all what has been added in information and magrav fields to that original seed, strip it all back and go back to that original seed. And the tests that have been done by Mr. Keshe have shown where they can take wheat and soaking the wheat in the CO2 water for certain lengths of time removes these fields of information. And the plant that they end up with is essentially going back to its original grass. So they managed to remove all those layers of information. But it does pose a couple of questions in that, do we want to go all the way back to the original grass? So when we start looking at stripping back these layers of information, it's what type of layers and to what extent do we want to go and remove these layers? Do we want to remove the GMO layering that's been added, the hybrid breeding, or even the 2,000 years of natural selection by farmers? You know, so we have to be careful on what we're wanting to achieve out of this. So by the same token, by removing certain layers of information from these seeds, we can also, I think eventually with science, understand that we can also enhance the seed. So we can go one way and we can also go the other way. So we can add certain magrav fields to our current seeds so that we can produce plants which have higher yields, more nutrition, are able to grow in more diverse conditions. So we can grow a lot more crops in desert areas which we haven't been able to do before, or grow in very high rainfall areas. So we're able to add conditions and information to seeds for the benefit of us. This would allow current farming to be revolutionized in ways that we haven't even not been able to imagine yet. And by doing this, obviously we'll get to this point where we might not be want to eat food anymore, but I think there's a huge transition time where a lot of people, we still need to eat food before we can go entirely onto the fields. And this will allow us to sort of feed humanity on a small amount of land, because if we're able to produce huge amounts of produce from smaller amounts of plants, smaller farming areas, so that we can feed the people, and then we can allow the rest of the farmers to become our new environmental regeneration specialists, so they can take their expertise and go and start regenerating nature, so that we don't have to use so much land for all our crops, and we can actually try and restore the land and put it back to nature. So it's an understanding of what we're wanting to achieve with the seeds, going back to the original or adding what would be for the benefit of everybody. And in that sense, we would like sort of your help at home there to do some testing. So take some of your seeds that you're growing with and soak them in your different GANS waters of CO2, copper, your zinc, CH3, soak for different times and plant these. and just take photographs and record their growth and have a look at the growth of other plants next to them, because they will also affect, if you understand, they'll also affect the plants next to them. It's not just a very isolated field effect. You will be changing the whole field around your plants. And give us feedback on these, because the more results we do on this, the more information we can gather. So we'd like, if you'd want to do that, and please let us know. Any questions so far? We are at the end.
Excuse me, Jimmy. Has Mr. Keshe actually devised a method of peeling back those layers to an optimum seed, which will give agricultural benefits as well as food stuff? Because back at the grass level, the seed would be pretty small, correct?
Yes, you know, you're going back, if you're going to go back to the original grass, then it sort of does defeat the whole objective. But it's understanding that, and from what we can gather at this stage, it's the soaking times that you want to soak the seeds for, and that time will remove certain layers. So it's a case of taking some seeds and playing with them, you know, just record what you're doing, and we can get some feedback. And it's important that one also, the conditions are different, whether you plant your seedlings in a pot or whether you plant them in the ground as well. And it is, to do these sort of experiments, it's better off planting them in the ground, because that's where the plant is in its really natural environment than in a pot plant.
Thank you.
Yes, I mean, we're going to have to look at, there's so much research and work that the future scientists are going to have to do in discovering all this and adding to all the different knowledge and layers of information that can be gleaned from all this. So we're just scratching the surface here.
Now, we've just got the theoretical, but yeah, all the practical will have to still be done in the future.
Sounds like a lot of jobs for 1,000 years.
Yes, well, you know, all those scientists that are going to be unemployed soon, they're going to can have many jobs and get their teeth into all of this information, and they'll have a ball, because it opens up a whole new dynamic for a lot of scientists, and we just hope that they do embrace the technology.
Well, it's going to be very useful. I remember when we were in an organic shop for some time, one of our big discussions was with people that were allergic to wheat or had some reaction to it. And one of the articles or so on was saying that around about the 30s they had a rust, and then they bred in a layer which prevented that rust, but which reacted with people. So if that, for example, was true, it'd be interesting to remove enough layers to get back beyond that layer that was bred in there around about the 30s.
Yes. You know, I think in Mexico, some of those farmers have also done some experiments with their corn, and typically I think you get maybe 2 cobs on a plant, and they've been getting multiple corns.
Like a dozen,
yes,
cobs per plant, some of them.
Cobs per plant, so it has, you know, huge implications for agriculture around the world in feeding everybody and being highly productive.
I've got some corn growing at the moment, and it would appear that originally there would be multiple cobs, because small sprouts come up from each side of the major plant. And if you get them to produce corn, you'd have a huge crop.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, some of those corn, they were literally, I would say, maybe 8 foot or 10 foot high. Some of those Mexican corn plants, they were a special variety, because, you know, they have so many amazing varieties there. But yes, they were huge, and they had many cobs. And yes, to my mind, you know, from what I can recall from a little girl and the corn in the fields near where we lived, there was not 1 or 2 cobs at all. It was many, many more. And they seem to have declined over time. And I think it's really the varieties and the seed company people putting things in place there.
That is right. Same with the wheat. The wheat used to be about 5 feet. I remember I couldn't walk through it without getting lost. But now you can walk through wheat and it's only about 2 feet maximum, and actually it's down to 1 foot high. So
Yeah, it's just neat.
the longer ears, they've certainly modified them genetically to produce longer ears, but it's done something in the process.
I read somewhere that they were trying to counteract wind, so they actually wanted a shorter plant. So they bred it specifically to be shorter as well. But I think most of the allergies today are not from the wheat. I think most of the allergies today are the fact that most Western farmers, including I think Australia, but I know in America it's common practice that Roundup is being used to dry the plant out before it is harvested, which is a shocking and horrifying thought, but that is what they're doing.
That is serious.
I'm dead serious. Because they get then a uniform drying of the crop, and then they can just mow through it and everything's harvested at once.
It saves time because otherwise you're allowed to dry naturally in the field, and this way they can go spray it and harvest next week because it's all dyed up. So yeah, I think that's been the biggest implication.
That's the biggest cause of all the problems with people's wheat allergies, I think.
Yes, I'd say so. Actually, it'd be an extra expense for farmers in Australia, well, where we are anyway, because they could rely on the hot conditions to dry the wheat out. But in a cooler climate, definitely they'd have an advantage by drying the wheat off all in one hit.
Yeah.
And you know, there's also an added benefit. You know, if you get yours drier a little bit earlier, you would be able to get more for your crop than the guy that does it in a month's time, because now I'm getting X amount per kilo and then I'm getting less. So, you know, it's all for the money too.
That is right. Mm.
So on that note about the glyphosate or whatever it is that's in the Roundup, is there any experiments been done about GAN's fields that would protect from the glyphosate sort of drift, the Roundup drift onto other properties?
Not that I'm aware of. It's obviously something that we can look into. Even if one looks at spraying your field with the liquid CO2, if you know that your neighbor has just sprayed his, maybe you can go and spray. I don't know. There's a lot of options that one can look at. But this is all a lot of research down the line.
I think that needs a good old lab, and at this stage we're not able to do that. But I think maybe when Ghana gets going, that's the kind of thing that they can look at.
Yes, I think if I see anybody spraying Roundup, I might start spraying CO2 around me.
Well, that's what we do. We have a neighbour that has a penchant for spraying around his boundaries. And Jimmy goes and wafts the CO2 all over, but he walks around with a big spray bottle. So I don't know if people think he's drenching himself in some Roundup, but it's CO2.
It's nice to know that there's a possible answer.
Yeah, I'm trying to spread the peace as well. So
Good on you.
We had a message from Maria, and she just asked whether we can send the PDFs of this workshop to Facebook, Keshe Foundation Germany. I think Lisa will tell you where we send them.
Yeah, we normally post them on Keshe Foundation Australia and the Plasma School Library Facebook pages in the info section. So
Jackie's
And also Jackie has a KF SSI Education Facebook page, and I'll load it up onto that Facebook info section as well. Anything else? Anybody got anything to report?
Well, I've got tomatoes under GANs. Well, they're actually watered by GANs, and they seem to be doing very well. They aren't growing much, but the fruit is starting to form. I notice your tomatoes have come early, or perhaps over there in New South Wales, Lisa, you have a different time, fruiting time to us. But
no, actually not. We would normally only be coming to fruiting time now, but we grew our tomatoes through winter. And they grew tremendously through winter and through spring, but they were watered with they had their roots in the GANS, you know, our aquaponic system, which had the GANS water in it. Mm-hmm. But what we found was we were a little bit lazy because it was just a sort of a side experiment, and we hadn't constantly been spraying with the CO2, or now in hindsight, what I would do is I would hang some liquid plasma bottles or some balls, things like that around the top, because what happened with us was we were getting beautiful fruit, everything was stunningly marvelous, and then we had 4 days of 35 degrees and an intense burst of sun from an ozone hole, and they literally fried up, and all the fruit was immediately stung by fruit fly, and that was it.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, because I think it was like such a change for them that they just couldn't handle it, and I wasn't really kind of blasting with the plasma. So, and the fruit fly had not touched them at all, but as soon as that happened, that's when the fruit fly hit. That's why I'm saying the bugs seem to stay away if they're really healthy.
Yes, I see. Actually, 35 is not too bad. I've recorded 45 in the shade here. But I water heavily, so I can't put GANs in. But you suggest spraying them with GAN sprayer as well. Is that so?
Yes. You know, if you make one of those what you would normally put the Roundup in, and mist spray them with CO2. If that's a bit of a chore, then you can hang a few bottles around. But yes, if you've got a bit of shade, we normally have 30% shade on all our stuff, but our tomatoes have grown so tall that we didn't have an opportunity to create a very high shade cloth for them. And when we just draped the shade over them, Jimmy got the tomatoes told him they didn't like it, so we had to take it off.
Well, that's about right, because once my tomatoes get going, I never put shade cloth over them, and they stand out there in 40-degree heat, but they've got to have their roots in water generally. And I haven't done it religiously, but I spray them with a squeegee pack. It's only a small crop of tomato, about 20, 30 plants, but I spray them with a CO2, but I'll have to do that more. They're looking very healthy at the moment. But I do water them with enhanced CO2 water.
What you might try as well is the sea gans. I don't know if you can get any sea gans where you are, if you are close to the ocean at all or not.
We're 150 kilometres from the ocean, but every time I go down there, I get big containers. I've got about 6 large 30-litre containers of seawater. So make
a sea gans, because what we found, because the sea gans is essentially what the previous people called the ormus, and that does have every mineral in there, and the tomatoes need something like, what was it?
It's 46.
46 or something minerals that they need to have a really good tomato. So if you give them the ormus or sea gans with the CO2, that really brings the flavour out.
Oh yes, right. I'll try that. That's caustic or potassium hydroxide in seawater, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, we usually get it up to about between 10 and 10.5, 11 at a maximum.
Yes.
Because
pH.
Because there does seem to be a difference. The higher pH you go, it's different. It goes, as you go higher, the GANS becomes flatter. So it's almost like it's precipitating out more heavier metals.
It was a nano.
Actually, that is correct. That is correct, because humus, when you're creating it for human consumption, they say is a very limited bandwidth. And if you go above that, you do precipitate out heavy metals. You're probably aware of that anyway.
Yes. So what I've done is I've done a few different ones, and I'll stick to between 10 and 11. Right. What you can also do to try and create different sea ganses is add the caustic at different temperatures. So if you warm it up to maybe 35 degrees, you'll get a different GANS to if you have it cold from the fridge, for example.
Right.
So, and what one has to remember too is that in your oceans, the most sea life is created in the very cold parts. So it might be worth doing a few different types of sea GANS, just as I say, throw 5 liters in the fridge and make sea GANS with that, and then do some at normal temperature, some at 35 degrees, and you'll have different GANSes in each different condition, a very slight difference, and then if you mix them all up, you've got a really good soup.
Sounds good. There's infinite possibilities here, isn't there?
Yes, there is. We just find with the sea GANS, we use it on all our plants because, especially in a place like Australia, the mineral content of the soils is very, very poor. So if one is adding CO2, then it's a given that one should add the minerals as well, because then you are gravitating more minerals and more CO2 into the soil and allowing the plants to be really healthy.
Well, in one regard, I'm fairly lucky in as far as minerals concerned. We're in a very depleted ground surface here, but in fact, I've got my bore water from an aquifer that runs from the Nullarbor Plain to the Perth coastal plain in fissures in the earth, and it's about 1,000 years old, just approximately anyway, but in the process of percolating through the rock, it's dissolved a lot of minerals. So the plants love it, the ones that do like lots of minerals and a fair content of salt, that is. Tomatoes.
You should make some sea GANS or some mineral GANS out of your bore water too.
Actually, that's an excellent idea. I'll try that. Thank you very much.
You might have to just add a bit of salt to it.
Yes.
Because, when I make the food GANSes, if you add the caustic, you're only getting the nano. So it's only when you add more salt to it do you actually get a GANS.
It's got a content of salt already. It's just a bit too high for European type fruit trees and European vegetables. But as far as citrus, grapevines, olives, figs and that sort of thing, and also vegetables, tomatoes love it. So it's got a certain amount of salt, but you say I could try adding a little bit more salt to make it more into a GANS state, I guess.
Yeah, try it, and if it doesn't look fluffy enough, if it looks like it's not really GANSing, then you can add a bit of salt to it to make sure it comes out.
We just got to
Right.
wash it.
Yeah, and then you'd have to wash it out
course,
afterwards.
Get rid of the salt.
What do you do with your wash water, by the way, your salty wash water? Do you...
Look, my first water that I take off my CO2 box, that I always keep, because that when I make my food ganses, that's what I use to add my nano to that to then get my gans.
Oh, yes.
My subsequent washes go on my driveway so that I can kill weeds, because I can't, we're also on rainwater and a septic, so I can't do anything with it except sort of put it in an innocuous place where it doesn't disturb the rest of the wildlife.
Right. Got you. Where you don't want weeds, saline water. Thank you.
Hello, Lisa, Jimmy.
Hi.
Hello, Carl. How are you?
Very good. I have 5 kale seeds here that have been sitting in CO2 GANs for 30 hours, and one seed has popped. So, how long
Have you planted them, or are you just sitting them in the water?
They're just in a bag here, and I thought nothing had happened, and then I looked a couple of minutes ago, and hey, there's one that's popped. So I had seen stories that it takes 30 minutes for seeds to germinate, but I haven't seen much other than commentary on that.
No, all one of the seeds I've done, went through my box of seeds and I took a whole lot of seeds, and I've also soaked them in the CO2 water. And I'd actually forgotten about it, so I left them there for 2 days, and I've planted those out, and there was none of them had really started germinating anyway. So I think soaking it, all it's doing is adding that information, and so that when you do plant those seeds, the seeds still contain the fields of the CO2. So you're carrying them over to the ground. So when you plant those seeds in the ground, it will have and create that CO2 environment around the plant. Even just a quick spray with, if you soak your seeds and took them out straight away and let them dry, and then planted them a week later, they would still have the fields of the CO2. Because then you've got to look at it from a commercial point of view. If you've got a big acreage that you want to plant, you can't go and soak all your seeds for so many hours and then try and plant them out. So the best is to just soak them and then take them out and dry them. They're not in there long enough to have started the germination process, but they'll contain the fields of the CO2. So that when you do go and seed them, they will have that effect.
But kale seeds, yes, it's taken us about 10 days for kale to normally pop anyway.
Yeah, yep. So not much acceleration there, but perhaps in the rootstock there'll be something.
It changes the plant. It's not an accelerant or like a fertilizer to the seed itself. It just changes the condition, and when the plant grows, it's changing the condition of the plant. So we mustn't view it as a fertilizer. It's changing the conditions for the plant.
It's a hard one because, it does make the plant grow better, but we're very used to thinking of it as a fertilizer. It's a hard one to wrap one's head around. It's taken us nearly a year to wrap our heads around that, because we keep on going back to this, it makes it grow bigger, but it's you've got to think of it slightly differently.
Yes, well, as you know, we have challenges here running a little community nursery. So we've just come back from traveling Australia and getting it back up and running. And before I left, there was probably 3 months where I was watering with CO2 GANs, and certainly you could tell the size and strength of the plants was greater. I might be sneaking ahead in terms of your teachings now, but what do you recommend for us enduring these 35, 40-degree days over the summer? We're hearing we don't need greenhouses anymore. Have you looked at that at all?
What I would try and do is we've looked at trying to create double balls and we've hung those over our systems, and it seems to have, our results are not, it's difficult at the moment. It does help, but nothing that really stands out. My thinking is, when you have you're going to have a really, really hot day, is to go around in the early morning and spray the whole environment with the CO2, because that will change the whole environment, the maggraph fields of the whole environment, and that should help the plants to cope better with the extreme hot days. And even the day before, water it into the ground with the CO2 as well, because we've got to understand the heat as well is maggraph fields, and so we need to counteract and with maggraph fields as well.
Certainly a good idea. And on last teaching, you were talking about burning weeds. Could you give me a recap on that, and in terms of making the GANs and then what you'd spray it around?
Well, when you look at the different types of weeds, they'll all have a different compositions of minerals. So when you burn the weeds, you are turning them into an ash. So you're really breaking the plant down and you're turning them all into nanomaterials. So you can take those and exactly the same process, caustic them first.
No, they are
No,
caustic.
they are
caustic.
So
what you do is you just put them into your salt water or your CO2 box water, and you would create a CO2/mineral GANs. You can literally also just
sprinkle
the ash into your grounds, and it will just remineralize as you're going. So it's just a different way to get rid of seeds. You can literally weeds. If you want to, you can literally take your weeds, blitz them with a blitz stick and make them into goop, and caustic them to get your nano, and then add them to your CO2 salt water, and you'll make a GANs of them, and then you can feed that GANs to just literally spray the GANs and GANs water all over your areas, and you'll remineralize your soil like that. So you use them for a purpose. It's just there are a few different ways you can use them.
By burning and spreading the ash, you're just helping that to cut out one or two stages, because if you just cut them and leave them on the ground, they'd take time to decompose. Whereas if you burn them and you sprinkle that ash with the salts in the ground and a bit of water, the ground will do the gansing for you and turn them into GANs. And
then you won't have this, which will germinate again.
That's right. Right on, Jimmy and Elisa. I've been using that burning method for, well, at least 10 to 15 years, and putting it on a certain plot, and anything will grow on that plot. It just makes it so fertile. It goes darker colour, and it's extremely fertile.
Yeah, it's a whole new way of looking at farming, and it's
an old way.
An old way that we've forgotten. So,
that cross knows how to do.
Yeah. And a lot of these things were done in the old days, and with not quite the understanding of why it was we needed to it, but it did work. And now I think with this plasma, it's just explaining a lot of the science behind why we did things 50 years ago.
I think you may have some questions on Q&As.
I've got some, but most of them are answered. There's Michael there, Carl's got his audio, and then Maria we answered. So I don't see any more.
I've got a couple of photos here to show if it's appropriate.
Yes.
We'll just stop our screen share, and then you can
share.
What do I do? Do I flip the
at the
screen
bottom
share?
there.
Screen share, yeah, just and then share your screen.
Can you see anything?
Not yet.
Takes a while sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes it takes a while to kick in.
Perhaps I didn't hit the right button.
Now we're seeing something happening. No, now it's gone.
Okay. I'll have to go back and find out where we can get into.
Something's going on.
Anything coming?
It did change, but now it's changed back again. So
No, nothing yet.
Okay, well,
now it's changing.
No, it just changes when you talk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, what is it?
Just share screen.
I'll do this one here.
Ah, here we go.
There we go.
Something's coming.
Okay.
There we go.
Right. Okay. Let's see if I can get this proper. Just a bit of practice needed here.
Yeah.
From that first program back in December, you were suggesting make a little plot and soak the seeds in GAN. So I tried this, and the idea was to see if you could provide all the nutrients with the GAN's fields, apart from water and the other GANs. So I had a bit of a rough patch in here where you can see there's actually seeding parsley and silver beet, and there's an old blue flower there. But I cleared a bit of it and soaked the seeds in CO2 GAN's water for 5 hours and covered it from birds, and watered as needed and sprayed on all sorts of GANs that I could find, like CO2 and the seawater GANs and CH3 and zinc oxide. It's a bit of a random experience, but that,
That's wrong.
but anyway, I took the cover off. Now these seeds were all seeds that, they were all reasonably old seeds that we had, and we thought they might be going out of date. So there's lots of stuff in it, but later on you'll get an idea of the range when in Trish's plot, because Trish's made a plot, and I'm showing mine first because she talks to hers and they grow a lot better.
Okay.
She puts love into the water.
That's the one. So what's happened here is mainly when I cut down the weeds that were on the plot, I just left them on there, and that's what you can see, a light sort of a mulch. And
Yes.
Obviously the buckwheat, out of all the ones that we had there, was the buckwheat seemed to come through in the conditions that we had. And that's another one from today. So that's
Okay.
yeah, and that's what's happened as far as today. So growing. So here we come. This is Trish tried another plot in about 6 meters away. So she cleared a little piece of ground in amongst her flowers.
Okay.
And there's one view of it, and there's another view of it. That was on December the 19th. So it was it would have been I think probably planted about the 12th. And there it is today.
Okay.
And you can see the sort of seeds that we had, like zucchini, radish, sorghum, beans, African marigolds, tree spinach, peas, lettuce, alfalfa, and probably a few other things. So, what we did was we soaked them in for 4 hours. As I think you said something like that on the first one, and since then I've been going around on every 2 or 3 days and putting a little bit of GANs into a 12-litre spraying can and spraying it all over the place. So it's a pretty random experiment, but we thought we might, find some results in the long term.
Yes.
For my main emphasis was that I've always been concerned that when you're growing a garden or something, you've got to go away and pinch some fertility from somewhere else, whether it's cow manures or seaweed or something from somewhere else. So I was rather intrigued by the statement that if you had lots of different seeds, you might attract all the nutrients that you needed for your patch.
Yeah, well, you see now, once these start growing and they're reaching maturity, and you can let them to go to seed, This is it's a long process, because then you just mulch them back onto the ground and reseed. So if you do this a couple of times, you will find that over time that soil will become so rich and fertile. So it's a long-term process of changing and adding nutrition to that soil.
But long-term in the sense that maybe 2 or 3 years, whereas farmers these days literally need 20 years to make a good topsoil layer if they haven't got much. So, it's still hopefully a good process, because where we're staying on our the biodynamic farm, that is, it's not our farm, but it's taken him 30 years to get 6 foot. It's not 6 foot. It's how much? It's about 30 or 40 centimeters of really good topsoil, and that's 30 years of biodynamic farming to get that.
Yes, I realise it's a long-term thing, but we'll see how things progress anyway.
Yes.
Well, this looks very nice. I mean, and hopefully you can pick a few things to eat off there and leave the rest to go in.
I said to Trish today, at least I can pick some of the old parsley still, so we'll have something coming. I've got a couple of questions to throw in. I think that's another view of Trish's plot with zucchini and a few other things there.
It looks good, Trish.
Yeah, well, I think we might have an advantage over you. We moan when it gets to about 28 degrees. Like, if it went over that, I think we'd probably all wilt here.
Yeah.
You better all shift to New Zealand.
But it's cold there, though. We don't like the cold.
I'll just put a GANS shield over you.
Okay, yes. We'll get that right.
Now, I was just wondering, and you may have answered some of this during the lesson, but I wrote down a couple of questions that I was just wondering about. The field difference to get an optimum result. Like I heard Mr. Keshe say quite recently that with GANS patches, if you had the same sort of GANS, I believe he was talking about, if to get the field difference between an injury, say on your leg, if one side you put 5 mils of GANS, then put 10 mils on the other, a difference of 1 to 2, and that would give you an effective field flow that would help cure. Now, can we apply that to agriculture in any way?
That's essentially what I've been trying with the balls that I've been hanging on above our plants, in that if you've got, say, a double ball and I've put them all over the place, is one needs to create a connection between all the balls so that they can create a whole field over that area. And you do that by creating this flow. So, for example, if I've got CO2 in the center ball, because you want to try and make your center ball gravitational, and then the outer ball would be CH3. And then all you're doing is you're taking 1 drop of your CO2 and you're putting it in with your CH3, so that you create that connection between the inner ball and the outer ball, and then you'll get your flow. So whatever you do, you have to try and get that flow of the plasma.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. There's a lot of stuff to think over.
Yes, it's
these are very meaty sessions. There's so much to think about. Is there any evidence that there's a threshold of a field strength? I think that's probably happening with the seeds, but one of the things I was listening to was when they were treating cancer, there was, as the field strength increased or altered, at a certain point, all the cancer cells, I think in Tokyo, flipped to healthy cells. And I'm wondering if there's evidence of, a certain strength of CO2 will do, or achieve what you're after.
I think it's not a case of the strength of the CO2. I'll be going into it again in next workshop, is that there's so many different strengths of CO2. It's not just one. And each plant will take in and use different strengths. And so that will be the next topic which we'll touch on.
This is what I was saying about making the different types of sea GANs, that, you know, each condition will change it slightly. So this is why Mr. Keshe has also said in the past, every time you make CO2, keep yourself a sort of a soup pot of your CO2, and don't use whatever you make all up. Add it to a pot that each time you make, you add it, so that you've got all these different CO2s that you've made, and create different strengths with them. Because each time you make it, if the temperature is different, you'll create a different CO2. If literally any little change, even if you're using, you know, I do CO2 with salt water, I do CO2 with seawater, I do CO2 with, we've started adding a touch of magnesium, potassium nitrate, which is a fertilizer. So I'm trying to get some potassium nitrate fields in there. I've also just recently GANsed a whole lot of cell salts, which is the ones you like, the homeopathic ones for your body type, and I'm starting to add that to the CO2 box, so that I'm going to be creating a full soup of different CO2s. And I think that can really make a difference, because then each and every plant might need a different strength. And so you make sure that I know at this stage it's a bit of a shotgun approach, but then at least you're covering all your bases.
Yeah, that sounds like good advice. I mean, I've have several batches of CO2, and I feel they're different, you know, somehow, but I'm not sure. But if you make it,
yes,
you're covering your bases, yeah. Well, thank you very much. That's a lot of information. I'll have to go away and digest it.
Yeah, there's a lot of info to it, and you know what we'll look at doing is in a couple of months' time is come back and revisit a lot of these concepts, and as we learn some more, we can then add to the knowledge to these concepts as well. As I said earlier, we learn so much more by doing these workshops. So we enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, great.
One last question, Jimmy. You mentioned a moment ago you put a GANs ball in the middle of the tree or whatever. Is this to induce a toroidal field around the tree?
The whole idea with the balls is because we understand that the plants are taking in a lot of the fields as their nutrition. They're getting once they start established, they get a lot of their fields from the environment. So it's a case of trying to change their environment and give them more of what they need. And we do this by hanging some balls, or we'll look at spinning some balls, but it's just changing that environment above the plants so that we can give them more of what they need.
Because essentially the plant is taking up water and minerals from the ground, but when they get established, they are making their amino acids from the gases in the air. Mm-hmm. So if you can give them the CO2 fields and the CH3 fields, you will find that they'll be able to build more amino acids in their leaves and then be healthier and grow faster, because that waxiness on a leaf is basically a layer of amino acids, and so it tends to be, it gravitates more amino acids from the atmosphere. And so by giving them amino acid fields around them, and you can add amino acids to your balls as well, you are giving them the fields that they're using all the time.
I haven't used CH3 in particular. I've only used CO2, but I'll add CH3. I got a consignment of 150 ping pong balls from Hong Kong, so I've got plenty of ping pong balls.
Yeah, you could throw them around.
Yeah.
Try make sure you add amino acids into each one.
Yes.
So what I do is I'll scoop some of my aminos off, whatever I can get, and then whatever I can't capture, I literally shake my jar or whatever up again so that the aminos go into the GANs, and then I collect the GANs, and then at least you know you've got quite a good lot of aminos in your GANs. And that tends to, but the CH3, when we did our strawberry experiment, the ones fed with CH3 were much sweeter.
Oh, yes. By the way, I've actually built one of your, what I call a McDonald reactor with the tubes, by the way. And I'm just wondering, have you used this reactor in the trees at all, or is that a job in the future?
Just in
which reactor are you talking about?
Well, the Jim Lee's reactor, you know, the double tubes, the one with the
double tubes. Oh yes, that one I showed you with the 90-degree angle.
Yeah. And in the centre, a GANS ball with a crystal in it, with a spiral nano-coated copper.
Yeah, we haven't hung them outside yet. We've been using them inside because, we enjoy the feel of them inside close to us. But, I need to make some more.
Actually, try and see those with when you have some really hot days. Put them out with your plants and just have a look and see if there's any change in the environment there for the plants for the better. So
might do that.
These are all things we just have to play around with. You know, there's just so much that we don't know. So we just try all things. And, you know, with all my experiments over the last year, I think I've learned more from my failures than anything that's actually worked. So
I think everybody learns most from their failures. So yeah. Thank you very much. I'll try that.
Thanks, Ross. All right, so our next one will be on 22nd of January. And thank you for participating. And we appreciate, I've got one more question. It just says thank you. Thank you, Maria. And we appreciate all your kind words. And if it wasn't for you guys participating, we'd like to thank you because you help us to do this work as well. So, all right. We can stop the recording and then we'll speak to you in 2 weeks' time.